I'm Jack Donovan, and you're watching or listening to Pater, PH2T3R, the Journal of Solar Culture. And today we are talking about the men's movement, which is, of course, men's quest to get women to make them sandwiches, because that's all they really wanted. I was trying every week. I've been doing this little video intro for the show, and I couldn't figure. I had some Roman soldiers marching, and I'm like, that's too over the top. I'm not doing that. And then I'm like, I just saw this great footage of sandwich making things, and I'm like, that's what the old like Al Bundy make me a sandwich kind of like a men's movement vibe. I'm like, I'm going with that. Dramatic sandwich making.
That was the most epic sandwich I think I've ever seen. I appreciate that Roman soldiers were not over the top, or were over the top, but this was right on the mark. This was
yeah. Well, it's like it makes it all seem like all noble, and we're actually kind of getting into the nitty gritty of it, because the question that I asked, and I sent out a newsletter today, was obviously I've been involved with the men's movement or the manosphere, or whatever you want to call it, for really 15 years, in some way or other, and I've seen it go through a lot of changes, and I really think that it's a few years ago it hit a peak, to where I thought we were having a moment. Like I thought that like all of a sudden like there were all these big players that got involved in the thing. And it wasn't just like, to do a short history. When I started out, I did this in the email, and it was a super long email, but the short history of it is basically, when I wrote The Way of Men, there was just pickup artist blogs, and then you had that growing Evo psych thing that was Chateau Artiste and Royce, all that world, and you obviously had like kind of far right politics that had kind of logged into there's something wrong with the way genders are going, and they were interested in it, but mainstream America didn't care. There were MRAs. I wanted to get that. There were like MRA groups out there, which were basically guys who got divorced and were real mad about it. And they had every reason to be mad. I'm not like downplaying their claims, because a lot of their claims were totally valid and still are, and are probably worse now. But they ended up sounding like a victim group, which turned a lot of men off. And so then there were also MGTOWs. And everything had an acronym. That's very, if you know that men created this, that obviously everything had an acronym.
MGTOWs, MRAs, PUAs, even the neo-reactionaries had their acronym. The NRX.
NRX. Yeah. That was a little bit later. That was like more like 2013 or something like that.
No, I think Unqualified Reservations was going in 2008. 2009.
Oh wow, okay.
And Nick Land was writing around that time too, who I think was a little bit less interesting than a lot of people gave him credit for being, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, so there were just these like ragtag little groups, and if you ask most men in society about masculinity or their masculinity crisis, that was something that people were writing about in the Atlantic from a feminist perspective. From the mainstream conversation about that was all driven by feminists. And masculine men had no, aside from these groups that we're talking about, had no real interest in this topic of masculinity or whatever. It was for weirdos. Like basically, you had a lot of guys who were in the military, a lot of people who just weren't dealing with it yet, people who could like live their own lives and not deal with it. And then I think we hit a point where young men were going through school and getting programmed. And so they're finding people like Jordan Peterson, like maybe 2014, something like that. And, they're talking about this stuff on the internet, and you're hearing all the stuff from POAs about how like dating really works versus what they tell you, how they tell you it works, like bring her flowers and tell her pretty things and she'll love you. And that was a lie. For
people who don't know who Chateau Artiste was and what his writing was like before he went off, the example you give, what they would call the blue pill man take is, bring her flowers or whatever. There was a Artiste blog about the so-called Skittles man. And this is a famous one where apparently there was a story on Reddit or something of this woman. These two women were talking and sharing their worst date experiences. And one of them had been on a date and it was her birthday, I guess. And she was telling this other woman about how this one guy had given her for her birthday a bag of Skittles, not like a big bag of Skittles, like a regular bag for her birthday. Mm-hmm. And the other woman is like, what did he look like? Because she had been on a date on Valentine's Day and had received a bag of Skittles from her date on Valentine's Day. And after some talk in a like a Shakespearean plot, they learned that they had both dated the same guy. And this mysterious Skittles man was a legend on the Heartiste blog, and he said, be this guy who's dating all the women, not the guy who brings flowers, who gets maybe one girl. That's like the flavor of Heartiste advice. As a married guy myself, I'll say there is something to bringing flowers and being nice, but the justification and the reason going on there was amusing, and as a stylist, he was interesting. But it seemed to me, and maybe you have a different take on this, but it always seemed to me like the political guys, the pickup artist guys, and the gender identity guys, that sounds lame. That's the wrong phrasing, but you know what I mean? Like the what is masculinity actually, guys? Right. Which I think started with the MRA types with Warren Farrell, I want to say, but I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, Warren Farrell actually has a colorful history because he was originally a feminist and is in
very prominent. He was canceled before canceling was a word.
Yeah, there's this magical book that I have because it's like I feel like it's the
myth of male power.
No, that's his book. Yeah, there's a book that's older than that. I'd have to actually look up the title now, but it's like from like 1971 or something like that, and it's this collection of essays by all the worst offenders to come, and like it's basically this key of like everything that boomers think is wrong with the traditional model of masculinity. Basically, boomers complaining about their like greatest generation parents. And the way dad was always shut down and he never gave us enough hugs and like that kind of shit that was going to become the refrains for the next decade. And you'd see it repeated over and over and over again. Would be like they'd talk about John Wayne, and they'd be talking about John Wayne in like 2010, and it was obvious that they were running a script because no one in 2010 even knew about John Wayne. Like kids weren't brought up on that, but they were like that John Wayne mentality, like that John Wayne like ideal. And they would just bring it up over again. And you see it like in the mainstream press, like 2005, 2010, 2015, because it was part of their script. And they'd been running that since like the 70s.
It's like they're creating a trope to strawman potential adversaries with.
Well, yeah, it was their woundology. It was their boomer woundology of like dad always like he loved John Wayne and he wanted to be the strong, silent type, and all these things that they've made like men need to express their feelings more, and all that started with that kind of like anger against dad. It's all these daddy issues from like that greatest generations and boomers. And so it was I could grab the book at some point. It's probably so buried on my bookshelf somewhere, but it's one I've held on to because it's very hard to get, and it shows it. But Warren Farrell is in it. But he changed the tune at some point and wrote The Myth of Male Power and so forth. But what I really wanted to get at today was to talk about like what's happened in the past, the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, because we're talking about the scene and how it was. And, before that, there was obviously always the mythopoetic men's movement, which was the real first pushback against feminism, but it was by feminists, really. It was by men who were like, well, we want you to have equal rights, but can we have some rights too? Like we need to like bang on drums in the woods and stuff. Gals, can we do it without you? Is that okay? Can you have your permission? I mean, that's the tone of that whole movement. It was real weak sauce.
It was it felt like a gateway. Like it seemed like they didn't have the balls to ask for, we want to be strong and basically war soldiers directly. So can we do it in a metaphorical sense? And saying this is important, and they bring all their mythopoetic Jungian stuff into, what is it, the warrior lover king magician book,
King magician warrior lover.
Yeah, it's like they use Jungian archetypes to sort of spiritualize classical masculine character traits, and they made it sort of less threatening to ask for that or to pursue that by saying, oh, we're going to pursue it in a sort of spiritualized sense. I suppose. Am I characterizing that? You were sort of more active around the time than I was.
They were handicapped to a certain extent because, I mean, they were basically boomer hippies. They were coming from this peace and love framework. They did one of the things that I criticized about the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover is that it's very uncomfortable with the warrior. It's like wants the warrior to be completely metaphorical in a like we're a warrior against causes, like this kind of like way that women think about being a warrior and not about like straight up slaying motherfuckers, because that's what a warrior really does. Sorry, that's the rule. But
it's what that word means.
Yep, it's warriors make war. That's what it is. I don't like to degrade that word by using it too overly. It's a great metaphor. We love to talk about the Iliad and Homer and warriors and so forth, but I don't claim to be a warrior. I don't get to do that. And that's the separate thing. Whereas these guys, get into we're warriors now. We're the new warriors. I think that was a group. Things like that. So that was another thing that came before the era that we're talking about. This like 2010s era when the word manosphere really was created at that point because. And it sounds so antiquated now because there was such a thing as called the blogosphere. When everyone was blogging, there was something everybody referred to it as the blogosphere. Now it would be X or the bigger conversation on the internet, TikTok. But then everyone was blogging. It was everybody was on WordPress or Blogspot or one of the other platforms, and everybody was blogging, and so it was the blogosphere, and then there were different segments of the blogosphere, and the manosphere was all the guys talking about men and masculinity. And that was the manosphere to be separated from the blogosphere. Now it sounds antiquated and out of sync. Even like people talk about red pill and blue pill. I'm like, man, that movie came out, like 1999?
Yeah.
Like Matrix, like it's such an old movie like that it's becoming antiquated, but yes.
But it sort of ties in because, I mean, the appropriation of the red pill metaphor was a unqualified reservations move. That was from Curtis Yarvin, who was writing as Mencius Moldbug at the time, back in like 2007, 2008. Mm-hmm. And to me, it seemed that there was an overlap between the pickup artists and the political reactionaries and the masculine revivalists, or whatever we want to call that group. In that they're all sort of following the Steven Pinker rejection of the blank slateism. And it's just different domains, but they all overlap because it was a falling back from this sort of progressive utopianism of we can be whatever we want to be. We can create systems to become whatever we want to become. We can achieve perfect peace, and the genders can be reconciled with each other in perfect harmony. And this can be political and intra-relational peace, essentially. Yes. And what all of these different sub-genres of the red pill seem to do is say, no, there are actually some like hard biological truths at work here. And those play out in politics. They play out in gender and relationships, and it plays out in religion to a certain degree. And it plays out in our own personal psychology as well. And the overlap seemed to be that. And it feels as if that manosphere, red pill blogosphere, Curtis Yarvin says his red pill metaphor, which he stole from the Wachowski brothers, got immediately stolen by the pickup artists and the Nazis independently and simultaneously. And he's like,
yeah, I remember that. Like, to be honest, I heard woke first from Nazis. Like they were saying that they were woke because they're woke about different things.
Right.
So I was interested before it ever became a big mainstream thing. But yeah.
But it's it feels as if the movement has fractured in part because it achieved its purpose. To a large degree, like, feminism is dead. Now, I think the final blow came from the transgender movement, ironically. Feminism could not survive that because its own premises undermine its defense against transgenderism and the gender queer movement, which is like beyond feminism, is trans feminism in a way. But I don't think it would have been able to do that were it not for all of the heavy criticisms levied against feminism by first the MRAs and MGTOWs, and then the PUAs and all these other people who really talk about feminism as silly, out of hand. Like the argument wasn't even necessary. It was a shit test to many of those guys. And I can offhand think of a number of women in my own social circle, family or close friends or stuff, who would have considered themselves, maybe still consider themselves, feminists to some degree, and have become happily attached to a more masculine man and are quite happy with that. There's no, like, they still have some attachment to the word, but the ideology itself seems to have been, and the ideals of that ideology seem to have been completely gutted. Seem to have been, it seems feminism seems to have lost almost all of its momentum that it had going in the 2010s.
Yeah, culturally, that's definitely the case. And as you said, that's actually what I said in my newsletter too. One of the reasons I think that the manosphere and the men's movement or whatever has kind of imploded, and it has become a bunch of guys. And that was one of the main criticisms that I asked for X and on Instagram and whatever. It was one of the main criticisms that I got, and this is one I've had for a while, is that the men's movement has really just become a bunch of guys with their separate audiences sniping at each other, going to war with each other. And if you understand things about masculinity, and this was, like, even if you write things that as I have and have understood them on a conceptual level, I forget about them. And then they become conceptually obvious in that men cooperate when there is a larger enemy. And if there is no larger enemy, then we'll fight each other.
Right.
And that is what's happening. And so the larger enemy that they were organized, and this is an important point, is that men aren't wired at all to fight with women. They don't want to. One of the essays I wrote about it years ago is there's no honor in fighting with women. Any competition with women, you've already lost. Like, there is you can't win. As a man, you don't get honor. There's no one's like, you really beat that girl, man. Great job. Like, no one's going to do that. And if you lose, they're like, buddy, maybe move, but so there's no way you can win. And so that's why men don't want to do it. And so men aren't wired to compete with women, but it was okay to compete with the ideology of feminism because that was a thing unto itself. And I think, but the ideology, all the people who are pushing that ideology specifically, yes, that collapsed under the trans thing because feminists, I always say they're like the vampires at a crossroads. Like with that, they're like, but we fought for Title IX protection of sports, and now men are actually beating all of our records and like pushing us out of sports in our own sports, but we can't be like hateful and not like, and they just start short circuiting and like they just fell apart. And they weren't prepared to deal with that thing that they had really helped usher in by themselves. Like they facilitated that, and they didn't really see the consequences of what was going to happen. But on the other hand, it's a little bit premature to say that they won. Of course, the ideology is gutted, but the infrastructure it created is all still there.
Right. Yeah. You still have like the Duluth model of domestic violence, and you still have, legal preferences in the court system more broadly and so forth.
Oh,
But
in the psychiatric manuals, in that like
yeah,
whether or not you're sane or not has to do with how the APA judges you.
yeah,
And there are so many details that I, as you said, a lot of these guys used to just laugh off. And I remember specifically having a discussion with somebody where they're like, "Oh, who cares? They added it to the APA." And I'm like, "Do you know how many men are going to lose custody because of that?" All they need, okay, a female psychologist is going to come in and diagnose them with something that doesn't exist.
yeah.
And so I'm like, those things actually do matter in real life. And
There is definitely some stickiness there. However, if all those laws came into being in the first place because of cultural pressure, then the cultural place that we are now, while we still have to endure the absurdity of many of these laws and this infrastructure that has been built into place, I do think it's only a matter of time before people like Tim Pool and Mike Cernovich and Michael Schallenberger and these other litigious, reasonable people come in and push, or the entire state of Texas just decides to bowl it all over because they seem intent on doing stuff like that. Thankfully. So I do think in the long run, the laws tend to follow culture rather than directing culture. It's a little bit of both, obviously. But I mean, we got these laws and these infrastructures because of culture in the first place. And so I think if the men's movement as a subcomponent of this broader reactionary online manosphere movement did anything, it was to demonstrate, I think, to the public at large that we're not blank slates. There is some innate nature in that distinguishes men from women, that distinguishes men from each other in hierarchies, and that distinguishes our political structures. It's probably not the last time we'll forget that. We seem to be on this cycle of forgetting and relearning, and for the hard times create strong men, create good times, create, so forth. But it does feel like, the information hasn't totally trickled out to the whole, population yet, but it seems to be on its way out and becoming common knowledge in many ways.
Yeah, I think younger people are a lot more suspicious of it, as they're more suspicious of many things, perhaps, or not. Like there's one either the other, because there's a pretty good 50-50 split there.
We understand the military industrial complex and its dangers, but Tide Pods seem fairly safe.
Yeah. So I think that the extent to which that whole blank slateism, I mean, that was 30 years in what more really, 30, 40, 50 years in the making. And putting it into academia, and the level of influences that it's had on the way people think that they don't even know that they think. Things that we talk about as a magic are, well, I mean, so many things that are just taken for granted are part of that. And so, you still have to prove to people that men and women are different, in many cases, like that's, once you get out of like normal people who have kids and like whatever, especially, then you're different. I mean, if you take that to Portland and see how that's changed,
right?
I mean, there's still very big centers of gravity where that has not changed at all. So
yeah, it is funny because it's what's that famous quote where like everyone is a conservative about within the field he loves most, and these truths seem to hold on in a similar way. Like a question that non-chess players, for example, chess is a fairly obscure example, but we'll ask, why are there different gender divisions in chess competitions? There's no physical difference at play there. Why are there different genders? But it's a thing, and it has been a thing for a while, and there is a reason why there are different genders. And it's very hard to explain why there are different gender divisions in chess to someone who is outside of the chess world, But once you've been inside it for a while and watched people like Anon or Magnus or Karpov, play against even some of the best female players like Judith Polgar, who can compete at that level, but very few other female chess players can. You begin to understand these things at like a body level. You understand in a way that is hard to explain. But the difficulty in explaining those differences, I think, was one of the things that made the feminist movement and the progressive movements of egalitarianism more broadly so popular in the 60s and 70s. It's hard to articulate the causes against that because they're so numerous, and in their numerousness, they each individually seem so small to whatever degree you can even articulate them in the first place.
Well, right, and it's part of the larger fight of modernity against the scientism of things, in where something doesn't exist unless we can measure it. And if we haven't found out to measure it, if we haven't figured out how to measure it, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and you default to the ideal of equality,
right? Which is the opposite of all historical wisdom, in the way that people have done things forever based on their just knowledge of living in life. They defaulted to like, if we can't find the difference yet, then it must not be there.
Yeah, and I think the way to argue that is that I've seen used in philosophical debates is, our failure to imagine a reason why, our own ignorance about the reasons why some institutional difference might exist does not mean that there is no reason. And it's actually a very tacitly arrogant thing to say, well, I can't see the reason why men and women should be in, for example, different chess divisions, so therefore they should be in the same division. It's like, maybe your failure to imagine what the reason is, doesn't matter at all. Maybe you just don't know, which is, you don't get to default to tearing down who's the Chesterton's fences. The fences, you don't know why they're up, so let's just take them down. Hold your horses there.
Right.
And it does seem as if we're slowly beginning to get a grasp back, and the inter-tribalism we're seeing pop up again on the manosphere is a symptom of one, what you talked about before, that sort of Schmittian, like, we don't have a common enemy, so near neighbors become adversaries. I kind of enjoyed and kind of hated my time inside Christian circles, which is annoying for a couple of reasons, but probably the most annoying thing to me was the Catholics and the Protestants were at each other's throats almost more than Christians broadly are at the throats of pagans. It is intense. And when you hear Catholics and Orthodox guys talking to each other, it gets like the same level of adversity, but like the esoteric technical language goes up about 5 notches.
Right.
But it's the same thing.
Yeah. And that's something that I've experienced a lot in life. A general phenomenon is that if you are considered to be part of a group and you reject belonging in it, you become a worse enemy than is if you were
like a traitor.
Yeah, Indians who leave the reservation are like way worse than white men. Like, that, and that's. I'm not saying that, by the way. I'm saying that
we're describing. Yeah.
Yes, I'm describing it. I just have quotes flash before my eyes. But no, I mean, obviously, I've had that sexuality thing like that. They go after me first. If I talk about what's wrong with gay people, they will come for me 10 times quicker than they'll come for you. And the same thing is like, obviously the white thing. They thought I was on their side, and when I was like, no, I was never on your side. I came to your fucking conferences, I listened to your arguments, and a lot of them are dumb.
Yeah.
And some of them are good, and a lot of them are dumb. And when I don't uphold the viewpoint that they want me to, I'm 100 times worse than an actual liberal. Like you wait. Like I had someone in the comments like about the German paganism video, being like, wait till they make you go with the blacks. Like I'm going to be put in a prison camp with black. Like they think the craziest things, but it's just that's their mentality, because then you'll see you should have taken our side. You're one of us. Even though they don't want me, they just shit all over me anyway. It's just, but yeah, if you're in a group and then you leave, yeah, you're a traitor, and you get way more of the heat than he had than otherwise. And there's some of that in the manosphere or whatever too. It's like some guy like falls in love and gets married, and he's red pill or something. That guy, is vilified if he didn't do it the right way, and whatever, if he did it the traditional way. And I've seen that happen. But yeah, I think another thing that's happened is that some of the fragmentation that we're talking about that's happened in this men's movement is that they addressed really masculinity is a big thing. And I write about theory of masculinity. And that's really all I have to offer. People for years were like, why aren't you coaching? And I was like, coaching what? Like I talk about masculine. I mean, yeah, I could sit down with a guy who's messed up and like do some unlicensed therapy, but
you could probably make money teaching photography composition classes.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, probably, but at some point, that was always my backup. I'm like, maybe I'll just be a photographer. But no, I mean, I teach. I talk about masculinity theory and ideas around masculinity. I'm not, but when people ask me, why don't you coach? Why don't you have a group? Whatever. I resisted having a group or doing coaching for years because I'm like, well, men, there are things that they need to do, and you have to be an expert in the things that they want to do. And I wasn't really an expert in any of those things, so I'm an expert in fucking theory. So, like an expert in feminism and masculinity theory, but not in like what do men want to do? They need to get laid. If they decide to get married, they need how to run their household and like raise their children. They need how to make money. There are all these specialty things that you can coach men on that are part of being a man, but those are specialty things. You have to have a special knowledge base. And so now I think what we see a lot of is like, I was on a podcast for a guy who like pretty much, he used to be a fitness guy, I think, but now he only does quitting porn. Like he's a quitting porn coach. Actually, I've been on 2 podcasts with guys that I can think of right now who their entire marketing niche is helping guys quit porn. And if you want to talk about the like level effects of feminism on society that are not going away, pornography is one of them. Like the whole, the free love movement of the 70s and the whole, like, we shouldn't judge people and the sex work is real work and all this stuff that came out of feminism is still, like pornography is still out there and going strong, and that's not going away anytime soon. And, in a traditional thing where women are considered sluts or whatever, if they, in that situation, now you can have an OnlyFans and like, whatever, I'm empowered. I mean, that's a leftover feminism that's still very much real. Those girls get made fun of, but like many other people, they laugh all the way to the bank. Like, oh, here's my Maserati. Like, make fun, call me a slut some more. There's, and that was unthinkable. That was unthinkable, like in the 50s and 60s, and it's probably in the early 70s, unless you were in a very specific weirdo group. Like, oh, you're just going to make porn. That's going to be your job now. And that's something that's very much still a thing. But yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of men's have specialized. You have a lot of men's fitness coaches. Our friend Ethan Bucks specializes more or less just in men, helping busy dads lose weight, and stuff like that. And that's great. And I had one guy say the biggest problem with men and women, which I thought was off topic, but it was obesity in America. And I'm like, well, that's a big problem. I don't know if that's the one we're talking about, but it is a big problem. It makes big people. But
It's literally a big problem.
Yeah, it's literally a big problem, like in a scale way. But yeah, so there are a lot of the way it's segmented into a lot of these groups, and I think you know, and I see it happen even with things that I'm doing.
Well, I think what you're describing though is like as theory became like shifted into how do we implement into the practice, and the men's movement became bigger by a lot. It became marketable and it started attracting marketing types. And I think some of the fragmentation of the manosphere and the Red Pill movement more broadly was actually a byproduct of disillusionment, as a bunch of people jumped to the front of the parade and then a bunch of embarrassing things happened to them, or they were revealed to be phonies, or so there was a I don't remember the names because it's been a while, but in the white nationalist sub-movement, there was a hilarious incident in which two of the leaders of one group, one of them ended up cheating on his wife with the other one's mother, which led to a fist fight in a trailer park and the collapse of it was like scripted, but it actually happened. It was like the traditionalist workers part. People can look it up if they're interested, but it was a hilarious, tragic downfall of that movement. And I'm not necessarily going to argue that either of those guys are grifters, but things like that can happen. And as a movement grows, sort of as a law of numbers, you're going to get more like tragic failures and stuff. One of the things Curtis Yarvin complained about in the death of the blogosphere that you mentioned earlier is he said the blogosphere got too big. He said that the internet back in the late 90s, early 2000s was a wonderful place because there was 15 people on it, and more than that, but like not that many, and it was a small niche community that was that were all on board. They understood the rules in an implicit manner, and it was fun. And because it got so large and everyone's trying to sell something to someone else, it became less fun. And so I think a certain part of the collapse of the manosphere it sort of goes back to the law of masculinity you bring up every now and then, that like past a certain size, groups of men will split and divide into smaller groups. Something like that had to happen eventually.
Oh, for sure. It was just, there's an elephant in the room, obviously, which is 2020, and all the things that happened with that. I think that maybe things would have progressed differently had not this other mass disillusionment happening. It's like, are there bigger fish to fry? Are things worse than genders in my bio? Are there bigger things going on here than that? And I think that's I didn't address that in my newsletter today because it's too big to address. But obviously, the way that changed the last 4 years really have changed society, and the way that we look at authority figures, and the way that we look at institutions and all that kind of thing has changed a lot of people's perspective on a lot of things. So that, not to say that they changed their idea about men and women and the differences between them, but one of the things I guess I just segged to that is that we had a big mass conversion to Christianity that happened for a minute. I think that that's actually winding down. I don't think that that's going to, I think that's something that's probably reached its zenith already, because I'm not going to get into it because I don't like to gossip at all, which is why I'm trying to keep names out of this as much as possible, because I don't want to start popcorn battles, because that's one of the biggest problems that they've had is that the manosphere has always become, because YouTube and now Twitter, I mean, Twitter didn't used to, but YouTube monetizes drama.
Yeah.
So as soon as people start fighting, they create drama. But in terms of the Christian thing that I was getting to was that you have had some people who were pretty prominent kind of have things fall apart.
I'll mention a name in a way that isn't gossip, because this person came out themselves and talked about it at some length. Lauren Southern was a very prominent advocate for traditional marriage, an advocate for conservative politics, and a very, very public figure. in the conservative right wing. Now she's interesting because she's a woman, so she wasn't really part of the manosphere, but she was very supportive of that stuff for some time.
Right.
And she got married, and then a few years later she got divorced. And she's like, well, isn't this weird? I spent all this time complaining about single moms and, you know, the importance of traditional values in maintaining relationships. And here I am, you know, single mom, having embraced all this stuff. And it was a very thoughtful, and I thought extremely good reflective video she put out, sort of discussing that and how she doesn't think like traditional values are bad or anything, but she's like, they're so not sufficient. You know, if it's not like a return to Christianity and a return to traditional gender roles and stuff will solve all of our problems. And it did feel like there was a large number of men and women in some cases, but people more broadly who really bought into the tradcon take, that if we only return with a V to the 1950s, then all of our problems will have all the epic sandwich intros we'll ever want. And it didn't quite turn out that way.
Because there's so many other things going on. Like there's so many variables have changed. And also,
I'll drop one more name because this one I take some not to start sniping wars, but Dennis Prager is an easy one because he's maybe one of the older and more prominent, you know, tradcon advocates culturally, and he's on his like third marriage now, maybe fourth. I could be wrong on that. At least his third marriage, though. And it's like that's not.
Yeah, and you know, it's such a thing. It's kind of a weird thing in their community too. It's like not to get too Gen X about it, but there's this famous like video from the 90s or maybe even the 80s, I forget, but I forget what the preacher was like. It starts with an O, I think. But Oral Roberts, maybe, I don't know. But there's this dude, he was caught cheating, and he goes on TV and he's like bawling, like I have sinned, and like and you know, like these dramatic like martyrdom like things, like I have fallen from the way, and now I'm going to get up and take you with me. And it's vile, but like it's very common in that community to like be like, I've fallen, and now the Lord's going to pick me up. Well, like, well, where was the Lord when you've fallen? But you know, it's yeah. What I was going to say is that I don't think necessarily that Christianity has the tools to deal with third wave feminism. And that was the problem. I think that the people, the manosphere and the men's movement and all that came out of EvoPsych, as we've talked about, and it came out of EvoPsych, and it was a very secular movement, and Christians weren't interested in it. And then they showed up around like 2015, 2016, and started realizing, hey, this is part of our community, because there were sincere voices that are like, hey, there's a problem in my church. There's a problem with the youth in my church. Totally sincere stuff. And then also there's Christians include a large group of people. And if you can put a cross on it, I'm a good person and I'm here to make money. Yeah. And there's a lot of that. Well, and so a lot of that happened in the manosphere. Like they came in to be Christian men's coaches. And like now I can make money off these Christians and you know, like convert these guys and save their souls, but also $300 an hour. You know, so
yeah. I mean, there is a kind of red pill argument for Christianity in the same sort of historicism. This was what we were doing before. We're trying to move past Christianity, but that hasn't worked. So let's go back to what we were doing before, which is the same argument the neo-reactionaries make, the gender realists, we can say, make. The problem, and this is like the essence of the argument I tried to make in Holy Nihilism, is that line of reasoning is at odds with the actual spirit of Christianity itself, which is not about this world at all. If you're trying to be a Christian because you think it will give you better results in this world, if I'm a Christian, then I won't get divorced. No, that's not what it promises at all. if I'm a Christian, then our nation will be saved. No, that's not what it promises. That's not what it's about. If I become a Christian, then my life and my family will be saved. Not exactly. You know, your heart is still on earth. Your heart should be in heaven, and all the consequences. You know, Rome could be burned down, as it was in the 4th century that Augustine had to address, and you can say that we're fine with that. And so many of these people seem to have been drawn to Christianity because they see it as a spiritual means to an earthly end.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's not how that works.
Well, I think that's really how humans work, though. I mean,
yes.
What you're describing is paganism. What you're describing is like,
well, right.
Your gods will bring us better results. Perhaps we should worship them. Tell me more about this fire god.
When I say that's not how
you have sons.
When I say that's not how that works, I'm saying that's not how Christianity works.
Oh, I know.
Religions,
I'm saying, but people are people, and they worship gods for very different reasons than that.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are like, I mean, we read the Rig Veda, like, bring me sons and wealth. And boom, Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen, megachurch. Boom, bring me sons and wealth. There's lots of people willing to do that. And and there are versions of Christianity. They're like, God wants you to be rich. And so there's all kinds of that in the world. And also, I think I've always made an argument that that's why Europe became Christian, is because you could be a history nerd and go through all kinds of details of that. But I mean, they had all the Roman writing, they had all the Roman infrastructure, all this stuff, all this money. It made sense. If Rome was Christian, it makes more sense for us to be Christian too, so we can trade better. And now that all this stuff, it's for earthly reasons. It's not. That's why kings convert.
I think the first time I met you in person was in Oregon, and you were giving me a ride back to Portland where my semi-truck was. And I asked you why you thought, why do you think Europe converted to Christianity? And you said, double book accounting. What's your answer? Said, this Christian scribe can make this king way more money by keeping track of things correctly and stuff. So obviously he'll convert to this thing that the priest, the Christian monk / scribe. That was your answer. What was it? It was like 10 years ago. People say I've changed my ideas a lot. A lot of them haven't changed very much at all. But I mean, I see very utilitarian reasons for why they did that. I mean, it's you could be because they found truth. No, double book accounting. I mean, it's where resources at, and I think that's what people are doing with Christianity now. Like a lot of them were like, hey. And I see the math of it too, and the math looks right. Now, when you look at what those people do and how they make decisions, they make terrible political decisions. But the math is right. Okay, well, where's the money? Like, if you're going to make a movement happen in America, that's the group with the most money. It was always a joke. I think, and specifically Protestants,
many years ago,
made
a point. Yeah. What
is it? Specifically Protestants, not Catholics.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, Catholics have no money in America. That's a European Mexican thing. It's a lot of the world, but it's not here. It's America is a Protestant country. And I mean, that's Scott Laughlin, who was a guy who actually helped me on The Way of Men. And he was writing about a lot of the stuff. And he still blogs, actually. He still got his blog. I think it's called Laughlin on Science. Bright guy. And he's a PhD in physics. And he was like, pagans, they can't even build a church. They can't even, all these, he's like, I'd be but pagans can't even build a church. They can't even get it together enough to build a church. Look at all the money that's in Christianity. I mean, down the road for me, there are complexes of hip, cool Christianity churches that are bigger than shopping malls, all around me. And that's, I mean, there's money there. And that's what I think a lot of influencers also saw that too. I'm like, oh, there's some money there. Like, God, you know,
Yeah.
like what God wants me to do, you know, like that's so it. A lot of people, I think, cynically converted and or just kind of like started saying God a lot. I think a lot of influencers just started saying God a lot, and maybe it's the deist God, maybe it's like whatever God, but they've just started saying it a lot. But yeah, so I don't know. What else? There's so much to talk about with this subject, and I think it's what people come to me for. So that's why I was kind of figuring we throw it out here.
I hate to bring up Hegel in anything even remotely like a positive light.
No, you did.
But you can see the attraction in his dialectic theory of history when you see events play out, because the problem with Hegelian dialectic is the idea that you can logically predict how things are going to go in some kind of long way. You can't deduce the logic of history in the terminus point. But you can see a like, okay, we solved the problem. We've hit a new kind of understanding. And now there's a new split. There's a new division. And like we're at a new place with new points of disagreement. And I guess another way of putting it is like no victory is final. No defeat is absolute. There's always some new thing that people are arguing about. And I don't mean that in anyone who knows me will be chuckling. I don't mean that in a diminutive way. I think the arguments are often very important. And as you pointed out with like the infrastructure legally and culturally that feminist theory, you know, saddled us with, the consequences of these arguments can be quite consequential. But we're at a new place. It feels like the victory of the red pill movement, the manosphere and stuff, was the cultural defeat of blank slateism. I feel like the transgender, genderqueer stuff is the final boss battle.
Well, yeah,
so to speak.
And the thing is, like, everybody could get on board with that. That was a thing. I think it distracted a lot of attention from other things, because you have to be pretty messed up and pretty deep into that theory to be like, okay, puberty blockers are all right.
Yeah.
You have to be like grooming young kids to do, yeah.
Or groomed into deep levels of conformist thinking. One of the two. But I remember this is a funny prelude to our current day. Thomas Harris in the Hannibal Lecter books first described Buffalo Bill as he's not transgender, but he thinks he is.
It's something far more severe.
Yeah, that was
his pathology is far more severe.
It's like nailed it. Just all of 2019, you know. Yeah, 2020 became about something else.
That is true. The pathology is far more severe. Absolutely. That's what they're doing. What they were doing with young kids, I think, did become a more immediate problem, because people were sending their kids to school and they're like, wait, a guidance. I mean, there's laws on the books in some states where like you can have your kids taken away if you don't facilitate their transition. It's like elementary school and shit. Like and I think conservatives and just like people who are sane united against that, because it's like weird Frankensteinian butchery. Like
I think what it is, and again, this can feel very subtle. It can feel very non-consequential at first, but I think these things are delegitimizing, and like it's delegitimizing to the state itself, and that can sound very like what's a normal person to make a statement like that. But I think the foreshadowing of this is things like Bud Light, where if they follow the signaling and advice of this extremely vocal minority and its advocates to the point of pissing off the majority of the public, a lot of their their survival is really contingent upon a degree of tacit support. When, if someone gets pulled over by the cops for, breaking a law or something, and they run away, the majority of the public is going to be rooting for the cops to capture the person, and they might even assist if it's at all possible.
Right.
But in a state where the police are enforcing, these kinds of insane gender laws, people are going to reverse that, even when the guy who the police are pursuing was in the wrong. They'll say, just in the news today, there was a big, cop city thing going on in Georgia some years ago. Antifa got into a prolonged siege with them. And it was like a big ordeal. Apparently there's a new cop city going up in my home state of Washington. And the left is doing their thing. They're organizing, they're preparing to lay siege to that. I don't know any Washington conservatives that are going to be on the police's side on that. They're not going to be participating with Antifa, but they're not going to, say anything in defense of the cops. They might even say, yeah, let them burn that training facility to the ground or stop it from going up, because Washington passed a law, or I think was attempting to pass a law that would make it legal for the state to hide certain medical procedures from the knowledge of parents in certain circumstances. I'm misremembering. If a child was a runaway and went to a in-between home shelter, if there was some concern pertaining to gender stuff, the shelter wouldn't have to tell the parents where the kids were or things of that nature. It explicitly permitted hiding medical information from the parents, in a classic understated Trojan horse into this more serious stuff. And if the cops are going to enforce that, they're going to lose the tacit support that is required to maintain its legitimacy in the long run. And it'll be it's hard to predict how these things will play out. To some degree, it's not predictable, except this can't work forever.
Yeah. It just depends where you are and what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think that has been delegitimizing the state. We had a commenter just jump in and say that Back the Blue has certainly lost its luster for the past few years. Yeah. And honestly, I think that's
like January 6th did that.
It depends where you are. It depends where you are. I mean, I do live in a city that's been described as having more cops than people. But I mean, there's like a blue line license plate like every third car in my neighborhood. I mean, and there's a sheriff car sitting right down the street. And actually half the guys I roll with are cops. And I think that it just depends where you are and what they're backing. Yeah. I think when you're in a major city, that is the case. But like I know we have a guy in Order of Fire he's a cop in a small town. Yeah, and small town cops are still small town cops in many cases. Like they're not the enemy. They're probably more mad at the government than you are.
Yeah, like I said, like a lot of these arguments against law enforcement, I've heard in the mouths of law enforcement agents or former cops. Many of them are very cool and are like, WTF. I think the Seattle police force has been like cut by 40% or something like that. Yeah. And a lot of them are very good guys who wanted to do right by their community, who basically said, screw this. I'm not I gotta
move or go somewhere else. Yeah. And that's what, we had a commenter trying to join the Order of Fire a couple of weeks ago when I was putting out applications. And he said, do we still have a ban on federal agencies? And I remember my response was, if you work for the National Park Service, please apply. but the other federal agencies, I'm like, I couldn't think of one that isn't involved in evil. I tried to think about it. I'm like, well, no, 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 no. Yeah, no. All federal agencies bad. I was like, if you're doing law enforcement for a federal agency, it's not like there isn't good work happening somewhere in there. I mean, I'm sure there's still child rapists getting like prosecuted across straight lines and all kinds of things like that are happening. That there are good guys doing good things still in that. But how do I parse that out? Like, how do I separate that from the guy who's going to shoot your dog?
And it would be one thing. It would be one thing to parse it out, like if it's just an organization that you don't like I don't know, like a BlackRock or something.
Yeah,
it's an entirely separate thing to parse out when those institutions have a habit of trying to infiltrate groups like all around the world and screw them up. Like, like you've made so many enemies. Again, it's like that delegitimizing thing. It's like, yeah, everyone hates you now. Good job.
Yeah. Well, when you can make it, you do just nothing but messed up shit for years and years and years and years and years. What do you think can happen? But I mean, obviously, and we all know the rank and file are not making those decisions. But at some point, that's just I was just following orders.
Well, and so, I wonder if we've hit upon a sort of possible prediction path for where the next manosphere might center, because it sounds like the manosphere at the intersection point between the NRX guys, the PUA guys, and the gender realist like trinity, feminism was the center point. Feminism was kind of the Schmittian shared opposition that unified that to whatever degree. If feminism winds up being replaced by the state as the common enemy, which seems to be
in 2020, it was like big pharma.
Yeah, and
it still is kind of. Yeah,
it seems to be a combination of COVID, January 6th, and other political stuff. Then there's some shared complaints that libertarians and leftists have about surveillance and the military-industrial complex. And I actually first heard a real breakdown of the Vegas shooting and all of the shenanigans going on surrounding that with the FBI from a Marxist podcast. The left is very aware of these, that they're the ones, Marxists are the ones I heard stories from about the FBI trying to entrap a young Muslim pizza delivery guy with honeypot female online friends, trying to get him to go shoot up a school or something. Like
terrorism.
Literally.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like we don't do that.
So there's an emerging shared opposition to the government, primarily but not exclusively at a national level, that might serve as become a kind of a new locus for whatever movement emerges out of the manosphere.
Well, in a sense, like, okay, we don't have time to talk about gender studies because we have bigger problems on our hands. Like men have work to do. Like a little bit like there's some work that men have to do that's bigger than that. But
like war with Iran.
Yeah. I mean, but on the other hand, it does. We can say all that, but I mean, all the problems that the manosphere was talking about, aside from feminism, I mean, I strongly dislike feminism, but I got into this because I cared about heroic masculinity, and I wanted, and I saw, the ways that men could be good, and that they. Good, not in a necessarily moral way, but that they can be impressive.
Virtue.
The way that they can be good at being men. I was very inspired by that, and that's something that I feel very strongly about. Wanted to protect and move forward into the future, and that was my main concern, and still is really. Those problems haven't gone away. I mean, sure, we have good signs, like all the people who were middle-aged men doing jiu-jitsu, middle-aged men used to just sit around and get drunk.
Yeah.
Like there's all kinds of things that like are happening now, and like there's everybody complains about the broccoli head kids at the gym, but they're like packed.
They are at the gym.
They are at the gym. And so there are a lot of things now. They're also probably taking trend and like you're like doing some things that aren't ideal.
Yeah.
But the need for male role models, with the fact that they're all still coming from broken homes. And 90%, I mean, tons of kids are out there. I'm not going to give you a percentage because you're going to fight me on it. But
I will say to your generational point from before, the statistics I've read that seem most reliable, and those come from Charles Murray, seem to indicate that divorce peaked in the United States in the 1980s.
Yeah.
It's very hard to persuade people of that. In both of our personal lives, we know people who get divorced and stuff, but like divorces are so much more noteworthy than the marriages that just stay together.
For sure.
They say news is composed of man bites dog, not dog bites man. Because man bites dog is a story, dog bites man is not, because that's like normal. In our own personal circles, divorces are very dramatic. They're very like, oh gosh, did you hear about so and so? Whereas like the couples that stay together are just,
no one notices.
There's no stimulus there. Yeah,
exactly. Happily ever after is bad news.
Right. So there's an asymmetry and memorableness there, but
in the same way the doctors always look for sickness. They have a sickness bias.
Who's that Chuck Palahniuk character in one of his books where he made it partially through med school, and so he's always seeing potential diagnostic signals in everyone around him. I forget which book that was, but there's that tendency.
No, absolutely, and although divorce may not even be part of it. As far as single mother, it's like, who said that there was a marriage?
That's true.
There's a lot of baby mamas that are just like baby mamas.
And the converse argument that some leftists actually make that I think is correct is that the idea that marriage has declined dramatically because of no fault divorce. It's like, it is possible that a marriage can suck. Just because you don't get divorced doesn't mean you're in a successful marriage.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a discussion that we've had a couple times recently, has been like, why don't these people just stick it out? Because like the grass is not greener as to wherever they're looking. And they probably should have, they could probably figure it out better than whatever's mess is going to happen from the divorce.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, there's, I think
it's complicated.
The point that I was originally making, digression, and whatever, is that a lot of the men now that we're counting, the young men you're counting, are going to be coming from like mixed households. There's a lot of young men out there who are not going to have. I was actually very lucky. I mean, I had the nuclear family that stayed together until very recently. I mean, maybe still we're still holding on here, but I was from that, but that was still in my peer was 50-50. It was like not 50. We can't really say, but it was very, very common for people to not have both parents around. And I know it, and so many of the guys like in our group have had a few marriages and have kids from different ones floating around and whatever. And they're all trying to be good guys, but that is a factor in a lot of things. And the point being is that there are a lot of young men who have not had a positive male role model in their life, and they haven't been mentored very well in masculinity. And that's what people were having a concern about, that hasn't changed at all. Right. I mean, there are obviously some very proactive men who have really tried to change that. I know, I mean, the one of the most positive things I think that have come out of this discussion that I know of is my friend Matt Boudreau, who like helps people homeschool their kids and has this whole network of things called the the Apogee, I think, program is what it's called, but and all kinds of another thing that's a brand that he does that under. But I mean, and he's very much about like, helping, influence young men in a positive way to be more successful in life, to do, like to have that kind of mentorship in the background. And there are a lot of guys out there doing that, both from like Christian perspectives and from non-Christian perspectives and whatever. And that's really, really good. And that's a positive thing, but that need is there. And one of the things I think people probably want me to talk about in this thing is the way that masculinity is being marketed to these young kids, because that is still very much a thing, and that hasn't gone away. And that is why a lot of people are disillusioned with.
That was so much of the first part of
whatever.
That was so much of the first part of The Way of Men too, wasn't it? About how, like, business types, we don't need to name names, will make masculinity about owning your Lamborghinis and making lots of money. And, everyone wants to make masculinity about the thing that they are selling, priests and so forth. I wanted to jump in because Mick Tubis, I'm probably mispronouncing that, had a very interesting comment, but we've been kind of ignoring the comments. So he says, trauma is essential for men to actualize, whether it be divorce or some other significant loss. And I think that's a very interesting point, because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my observation as a millennial on Gen X is like, it was so much latchkey kids and divorced parent kids and kids with an incomplete home. And so the focus has been on, like, some of these kids are messed up because of what was absent in their childhood.
Right.
And as a millennial, looking at other millennials and some of Gen Z, I'm seeing a lot of kids who had not just a nuclear family growing up, but a very, very healthy and often very wealthy nuclear family growing up, very well-adjusted, very well-to-do. And you end up with lots of failure to launch type situations. They're called NEETs in Japan, not employed in education or in training. And there's like an absence of pain. There's like an absence of trauma, as Mick Tubis points out. And maybe that's a different problem, or maybe it's some version of the same problem, or
it's the Fight Club.
Sure. The folk.
Our tragedy is our lives.
Yes.
We have no great mountains to climb. We have no we have no great war. Our tragedy is our lives. It's that whole speech. It's the Fight Club problem. Basically, like, that we don't have big enough trauma. But then, I think that was the sense up until maybe recently, and now we're all like, I think everyone was traumatized by 2020, in a way that's more impressive than their parents getting divorced, and certainly I was, and still am, and I think that is manifesting in all kinds of crazy ways in different people, and that's a lot of things that are going on in the world right now. So I think that maybe the idea that nothing bad is ever going to happen, and that's the whole problem, is now no longer real. That's no longer a problem, But we I mean, obviously, I don't necessarily think that men need trauma to actualize. Maybe it just takes longer. And a lot of men actualize badly from trauma too.
Yeah,
I mean, they turn it into messes. So there's 50-50.
Yeah, I mean, we both hang out with a fair number of veterans, and in the veteran crew, there's a contingent of guys talking about not post-traumatic stress, but post-traumatic growth. And I think we're getting introduced to that in the book we're reading in the order this month, or maybe it's a different book. One of Nietzsche's books, where he talks about the axiom for the Superman is that which does not kill me makes me stronger. That's not the correct phrasing, but it's the idea of,
I mean, it's the famous one that everybody,
and it's not, people misinterpret that as like a descriptive statement, as like, this is how humans work. It's more like a mentality. It's like I am going to choose to be anti-fragile. And
Right.
many people won't, but if you think of it as a choice, I think it changes things, and trauma becomes, or part of the problem is the word trauma. Adversity becomes a narrative engine for the creation of culture.
Yeah. I like that he jumped in with hitting bottom isn't a weekend retreat. It's true. No, I mean, to be fair, you can't just get yelled at by a bunch of dudes.
Yes.
There's so much to go into. I mean, I wanted to get in. Obviously, we talked about the commercialization of things a little bit, and that's a big problem for a lot of people because the gist of what I was trying to get at was these young men are looking for some kind of guidance, and there's a lot of guys right now trying to sell it to them. A lot. And I see it. It's especially bad on Twitter, but you can see it everywhere. There's a million life coaches who are like 22, or at best 30, and maybe have spotty careers and haven't done that much, and are just like looking to make some money. And they've convinced themselves that they're life coaches. I've seen some people do that. I'm like, you're a mess. You shouldn't be coaching anybody. But I mean, I question myself. I'm like, I don't know. I got yeah, shoots. I don't know. I need to be coaching anybody. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people. I've seen the temptation in myself to do it, and that it's really been encouraged for me to do it, and I refuse to, and that's probably me being dumb, maybe. I don't know, but there's so many impressionable young men who are probably maybe not going to be anything, who you could just take their money and just sell them some like bullshit. And like I started to call it jerk off masculinity, or like jerk off like repetitive content, because I'll see it so much, and the stuff that means something to me, that's like really like motivational, like heroic stuff, has become so recycled and probably run through AI at this point so many times, and like recycle that it becomes hollow. And you see people just repeating it really in a really hollow way. And I saw it today on X in the comments for this, and there are a whole bunch of great comments about this on my X profile under this, where I brought up this discussion. And some guy came in with this sociopathic book about manhood. His comment to my asking for what are your concerns about the man's movement, whatever, was a segment of the introduction to his book. And it was written like AI wrote a book about man. Actually, Bronson jumped in and laughed about it and said, he's like, AI chatbot, write me a book about masculinity in the voice of Ryan Holiday. Because it was like, here's some formula men's book. What we really have is a problem with fun. And I responded, I just copy pasted the speech from American Psycho.
That's such a
is end apartheid, and because it was, that's what it was.
More important problems than Sri Lanka to worry about.
Yeah. Like there's so much of that out there. Just these guys repeating this, like, you need to be strong today, get up, do it, like, and it's so programmed and gross. And the thing is, I write that stuff. I love that stuff. I mean, I need to hear that too, but I don't need to hear it every morning and manufactured by some guy.
The way you say it,
not sincere.
There's this joke. There's this joke. I believe it was Steven Pinker telling this joke at a linguistics conference about a couple of friends who go to an old Appalachian house where all these ancient guys who've known each other for 80, 90 years hang out together. And the friend introducing the acquaintance to this group says they all know the same jokes, and they actually have numbered them. So one guy says 12, and everyone cracks up laughing. Another guy says 37, and all the guys are just knee slapping, roaring. And the acquaintance says, "Oh, let me try 34." Dead silence. And the acquaintance leans over and says, "It's all about how you tell it." It's something about the way these guys say these Ryan Holiday types say these lines, it's like you said, it feels hollow. You're saying the joke wrong. You're saying the maxim wrong. It feels insincere. It was one of the first books I think I mentioned on these conversations with you was J.L. Austin's How to Do Things with Words. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that he describes a verbal act can fail is insincerity. And I forget the name he gives to that type of failure. He's very English in how he breaks down the different failures of a word act. And like if you say it sincerely, but you're not qualified, like you pronounce people married, but you're not a priest, that's a different kind of failure but if you say something insincerely, that's its own kind of failure. Like if you tell someone I love you, but you don't mean it, and it's felt that you don't mean it, that's a failed word act. And there's something about the personality of these people. You're not the right person. You don't have the, you're not the right person to say this because you're Ryan Holiday, because you made your living being a, marketing hitman sociopath. Or as the case is with memes, I got into this long thread a couple days ago over these memes will pop up about supposed facts about ancient Greek history. And someone was saying, they traced the etymology of Cerberus back, and it's something spotted. So Hades named his big dog Spot. Like, that's so cute and funny. It's like, except it's not true because Cerberus is not a Proto-Indo-European word. The etymology doesn't work. That's actually closer to correct than most memes come that try to be factual. My absolute least favorite one is the people who try to take Plato's name meaning broad, meaning like he once dismissed an argument by flexing. It's like, have you read any Platonic dialogue ever? He is the most pathologically open-minded person you will ever read. The arguments he will entertain and not dismiss are mind-blowing. Which is what makes him so great as a teacher, is entertaining these arguments and following them to the logical conclusion. The idea that he would flex in order to dismiss an argument. And so you can take not just certain personalities, but certain formats of presentation, formats of information. The meme format, there are sometimes it might contain factually incorrect information, but you're not learning anything useful by taking those in. You can dismiss memes outright and be much better off.
Yeah. And the same too, like I said, a lot of this, what I'm seeing is like text, text posts on X of like this manufactured, it's manufactured Band of Brothers speech. Like St. Crispin's Day is actually, I think, what it's technically called. But because I looked it up the other day, so I'm like, it's titled under that. But I've given it because it is a formula, and I've given it on stage a bunch of times, and said that I was giving it, and I'm like, there's only one speech. I'm like, if not now, then when? If not us, then who? We're like, hey, there is a thing that you do to bang those drums. And every man loves it, and you can do it. But if you're doing it for bullshit, it sucks and fuck you. And that's kind of like the way I'm like, when I write the really good essays, like when I feel like I really got to a point where I'm actually like being like, I said something, I'm fucking crying, like every time. And if I'm not, it's probably not good. Like, cause so when I'm doing this, I'm like, when I'm getting like the one in the Apollos thing, like that was personal. Like, remember why he started. And no one knows what that is yet, but it's in the new book that we're working on. But by the time I'm like, oh God, that's the thing. That's what I have to say right now. And like to think that there's some dude sitting there like doing like that with no, like just dead flat line, and be like, guys, you have to go and be cool today. You have to get up and be strong and fight the fight. Fuck you. Like, and the thing is, like, they're getting a lot of traffic because there's a lot of guys who just want to hear something basic and normal. And I wrote in the newsletter today, I think they're like the analogs of the women who buy the like live, laugh, love signs. Like, it's just some basic man shit that makes them feel good about themselves and jerk them off a little bit. Like, we're men, we're strong, we're doing a thing today. Yeah, but you're not though. You're just going to work, buddy. you know. So I mean, I think that if it's not sincere, yeah, you might get a lot of hits from basic people, but a lot of other people can feel it. And
Well,
so that's interest goes away because they're like, fuck, I don't want to hear this anymore. This is gross.
And there's a related, and I don't think it's as caustic, but it's just as sort of like eye roll inducing of a phenomenon when too many people start to do a thing. Like if I scroll Instagram and I see like 2 or 3 posts of people using carousel graphics, which I've experimented with a little bit. I don't enjoy it that much, but to try to explore some philosophical topic.
Right.
And they come to a really, really mundane conclusion. Like, this is exactly what some other philosopher said, like literally 400 years ago, and you don't mention them, which is fine. You're just exploring ideas, but it makes me be like, God, do I sound like this? Is that what other people, is the experience I'm having what other people read my stuff and feel like?
I know.
And
it's like, I've been doing this for years, and I'm like, I don't even want to do it now.
It makes me want to stop writing. Yeah, it makes it literally makes me not want to write. Like, reading this makes me not want to. Now, there's other types of bad writers where you read it and you're like, I could write this, but way better.
Yeah.
You know, and so there is some value in reading crappy writing, especially like really good selling stuff. Like, we've mentioned Ryan Holiday a few times on a few podcasts, but I'll mention him again. Like, he's a good formula follower, I suppose, but he is not a good writer, and he's not a good thinker. And a lot of people that are just messing around with philosophical ideas, they're trying to work things out, which I think is cool. I actually think that's awesome that people do that, and even do it in a public manner. But at a certain point, when there's so many people doing it, it begins to feel like a song that's being overplayed on the radio. And you start getting these SNL skits of podcast bros, and you begin to get an emerging archetypal caricature of a type. And you're like, God, I don't want to be that type.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. I've been like, how do I make this interesting for myself? Because I'm so tired of seeing motivational speak. I'm like, right. I was doing this for years. Like, this is what I do, and I'm like, I'm so tired of every single person like they've read a David Goggins book and they have to figure out a novel way to say who's going to carry the boats or whatever. I've never even read that book. I don't even know the reference. I just know that it's this thing that people have to say who's going to carry the boats. Like, it's such a cliche that it's become like so big. And it was probably meant something to people when he said it, but like I don't feel anything from it. And so I've been working really hard, and I think that people don't realize, like, I've worked really hard with the Order of Fire page. So I'm like, say something, like, how can I make this interesting for me? Like, how can I say what I'm saying, keep talking about stuff, but make sure that I'm still saying something that's not just the same boilerplate that everybody else is saying over and over.
Yeah. I think that's what it boils down to, and why the manosphere eventually had to die, because once masculinity reaches a certain point of acceptance, because it wasn't very accepted in 2005.
That's true.
Once it reaches a certain point of acceptance, men make up roughly half the population. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, like, what's the new thing to do once we're become comfortable being men again? You have to find you have to hop back on that treadmill and find something new to become, I suppose. Not instead of being a man, but like, we've hit this this rung on the ladder. Now let's keep climbing, Beyond that, I hope I didn't put my foot in my mouth too much there.
No, I was just laughing because Lucio came in the room and like scooted me Nice. He's like scooting it across the floor to me.
Yeah. So
but it must be Negroni time. But
excellent.
but I have an enabler here. You can see, but yeah,
That's
no, I
cool.
wanted to read actually some of these comments real quick because they're good. And one of the guys says, "Good morning to Siberia." I might know who that is. I don't know too many guys in Siberia, but I think I'm talking to one next week for this podcast. And then Paul Osborne said that men have become more isolated than ever. The manosphere has an undertone of angry men that are fresh out of a relationship and looking for a tribe. That's 100% true. And as I said before, we've joked about like a tribe is not an email list. And so it's hard to find that. That it's so hard to find. I mean, I'm trying to create it and it's a struggle. And one of the things that somebody responded in a comment that was instructive to me and reminded me of something is that unfortunately the way men work, as we said, is that they need a superordinate enemy. And not like I didn't write about this in fucking The Way of Men, but they need a bigger enemy. And I think that's sometimes why we even, have trouble with engagement in different areas that, in what we're doing is because, it's so much easier to get men on board if you get them mad about something. Yeah. And that is the nature of men. Like women will be like, let's share some happy thoughts. And dudes will be like, they won't share anything until they're like, oh, that is some bullshit. And then they'll be like ready to talk about it.
And it doesn't have to be grandiose either. One of my, like in the construction world, the thing that works is the freaking inspector or the plumbers, if you're an electrician, or the electricians, if you're a plumber, I would assume. I don't know. I'm on the electrician side there. But, if you get a really, really annoying, nitpicky inspector or a general contractor, might sound excessively technical, but like, your coworkers at work, if you're working in a male group, that can be a tribe, especially if you go like past an inspection that you were not expecting to, and you all get drinks with each other afterwards, and someone needs help on their car and you happen to know some mechanical skills so you can help each other out. Like, it doesn't have to be some grandiose world encompassing frame. It's almost certainly better to have a much more localized notion of a common enemy or adversary, because your building inspector shouldn't be an enemy in that sense. Right.
I mean, a local group is ideal. It's hard to find, outside of employment. That's what the big thing has always been, that most men's friends come from employment. Right. And so especially that's another thing I want to get to the comments here, but there's another problem there that because we have such mercenary employment practices now, people change jobs a lot. And so in the way that I've moved 3 times in the past, 6 years, people move job to job, place to place all the time. And so whenever you do that, it takes a long time to embed yourself with a group of friends. So that's the thing. But let's see. Someone said that they're watching me bump my head on the funny thing is the camera's still like 2 feet away. It's just that the Apple computer that the comments are on is actually like 3 or 4 feet away. So I'm leaning into that. Anyway. And someone said, please don't stop. I implore you, despite all the drama, you're the most real and honest voice I've encountered. Thank you. It means a lot to me. I do try to be honest. And I think that is true. I think there are a lot of fucking liars out there, frankly, and they suck. Someone said, Can't Hurt Me is actually a good book. I've heard that. It's inspired a lot of people. And that's good. I've never been, something about it just didn't seem like I was going to be into it, but it's inspired a lot of people.
For what it's worth, I read the first quarter of Can't Hurt Me. I got nothing personally out of it, but still enjoyed it. It was a good story, and there's a certain kind of person that I would recommend it to. So your mileage may vary. That was well written though.
Yeah. And some people in the same way that I can listen to Jocko talk about, and you have to really be into hearing the military lingo to be and then we were in blah, 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 blah. And then it's just a string of technical words for things that I don't know what they mean. And I'm like, okay, but there's some guy who's spent his whole life playing Call of Duty who's yeah, tell me more. So like, it's written for a certain audience. Someone said Steve Biddulph is a popular Australian author on these subjects. I've never heard of that guy. That's the one about my head on the screen. And John Umbrella said the men's movement got punched in the nose, a lot of tough talk, and then time to walk happened. The threat didn't go away when they talked tough. Interesting.
Is that a reference to COVID?
I don't know what that. Yeah, I don't know what that's a reference to. I mean, he can follow up with a comment if he wants to. I think that I just think it's such a big group, and like I said, the infighting is a huge problem, and it was a lot of the people going after each other was a big thing that I saw. Is that a lot of these guys would be fighting and they bring each other down, and that's for one kind of guy, but that's not very uplifting for anybody else. That's for passive consumers to sit and like pop popcorn and like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. In the same way that, to be honest, it's a sacrilegious week to talk about this, but I mean, ESPN is just fucking gossip for men. Because it is Super Bowl on Sunday, but I guess I know someone's driving there.
It's recently become even more gossipy and not just for men.
Because it's Taylor Swift and all that. But
right.
I mean, a lot of the infighting and the gossip and being paid to gossip, basically, and people doing passive consumers on that was a big problem. And like I said, obviously the marketing of it, over marketing of it became a big thing. And a lot of people just feel like they got scammed. And the elephant in the room, there's one elephant in the room. He's actually in Romania. Is that, I mean, I don't talk about people and name names, but he's the most Googled person on earth or whatever.
Yeah.
So like,
I think we need to talk about Andrew Tate. He's an interesting guy because he says true things that are mixed in with an ethos that I think is less satisfying than he markets it as being.
Or several ethos. There's many, because there's like extreme Muslim, there's like Islam overlapping with hedonism, like in a weird way.
Islam was recent. Islam, he only converted a couple of years ago, I think.
I know, but their fast cars are still there, and like there's all.
That's true.
It's a lot of overlapping stuff.
I don't think Bugattis are haram. I think they're halal. Some of the other things.
No, that was one of the. That was. I think I mentioned it. When did I mention that last? But there's a guy who I actually know that's in his circle who has followed me for years, and he seems like a cool guy, but he's definitely heavy into the Islam thing. And he like used to be private security, and now I think he runs a men's clothing shop in like I'm blanking on the name of where everybody wants to be, Abu Dhabi,
Dubai,
Dubai. and so he has a men's clothing shop there. But his Instagram story the other day was like him driving a race car and be like, the way to be Islam is to have so much halal fun that you can't have you don't have time to have haram fun, it was. And it's cool, and he seems like a good guy, and like maybe those guys, some of them are good guys too. I mean, like I'm not passing any judgment on them because I don't know them. And when someone's that famous, it's like what's the real thing there? Nobody knows.
Completely unrelated. Can I tell an Islamic joke real quick? Okay. This is from an imam. He said there's this a Jewish man who lives in a Muslim town. And he comes to his Muslim friend and he says, I want to convert to Islam, but I don't want to give up drinking alcohol. And his Muslim friend is like, well, that's very easy to solve. Just convert to Islam and keep drinking alcohol. And the Jewish man says, I can do that. The Muslim says, yes, of course you can. You're a Jewish man. You can drink alcohol. You can convert to Islam. It's no problem. And so he says the thing 3 times. He becomes Muslim. And his friend's like, great, wonderful. You're one of us now. You're Muslim. Now you can't drink alcohol or we kill you. This is an imam telling this joke to an audience. And I was like, no one can say Muslims don't have a sense of humor.
Well, of course they do. They're just dudes.
Yeah.
I actually have a really cool one that wrote a book about masculinity in Islam, like who it follows me. He's another kind of marketing guy that like is on X. But interesting take on that guy. I work in an industry has to deal with him. He is considered a joke and is blackballed by anyone that's worth its salt. Okay, so I guess they're talking about Tate.
Yeah.
But or maybe even the Sartoro guy. But it's
same mindset, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's him specifically. I mean, what I was going to say about them, and I think the relevant thing is that I do think that the manosphere kind of broke up into Tate and the Christians, and then everybody else. I think that's where we're at right now. I think that there's Tate, and then
he overlaps into a few different sectors. I think there's one dimension of the manosphere conversation we didn't really talk about, and that's the subject of work and what's men's relationship with work ought to be. I did a podcast about this like a year ago or so, but I think that the OG work talk guy was not Andrew Tate, but it was Tim Ferriss. He was his 4-hour work week was actually very big. It was kind of peripheral to the manosphere, but it was very much in there and influential in it. What I think we're seeing is two antithetical, so we've all rejected as an ideal this 9-to-5 grind. That's a slave mentality. That's for plebs. It's degrading. And I think Fight Club actually did a lot of that as well. But it doesn't really offer much in the way of replacement. So what's interesting is both Tim Ferriss and Andrew Tate talk about escaping the matrix.
Right.
But for Andrew Tate, the matrix to escape is low status. Whereas for Tim Ferriss, the matrix is work itself. The goal for Tim Ferriss is freedom. And the goal for Andrew Tate is power and status. And you actually have to work really, really, really hard to get there. Andrew Tate seems to be a workaholic. I listened to the first 4.5 hours of his Hustlers University series. And I mean, dude's not wrong about working hard and working fast.
But the fast thing is definitely I mean, I listen to him sometimes just because I want to, I'm running something way smaller than he is. And there's a lot that's going on there,
Yeah. But there's a third ideal, someone who I think more Americans are familiar with than Tim Ferriss even, but who gets ignored in this conversation and who isn't part of the manosphere, even though in many ways he's more classically a man than Tate or Ferriss. And that's Mike Rowe.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Mike Rowe, who's funnily enough a tier salesman in his own right. He's an extraordinarily good speaker and salesman and marketer. Yeah. But what he has embraced through Dirty Jobs and this direct, he's not talking about escaping the matrix at all.
Right.
Curiously. And yet he has escaped seemingly the matrix, the psychological matrix of marketing that both Tim Ferriss and Andrew Tate seem to lead men into. And it seems like there's a lot more male camaraderie just within work than there is in trying to escape work. It seems like the attempt to escape work is where we get all this backstabbing, all these guys trying to scam each other, all this other stuff.
Well, that's the nature of a certain thing. Okay, think about, I'm just thinking of the most recent show we watched Gilded Age or whatever. You got railroad tycoons trying to one up each other and bring each other down and whatever. And negotiating with unions and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a certain kind of man who's going to be doing that all the time. That's some king level stuff. That's not every guy. Right. And it doesn't have to be every guy. And that's not what masculinity is. And anyone who tells you that that's what masculinity is just trying to sell you their program. The thing is, and I called a friend out of this, a local friend who I've hung out with a couple of times, who is a marketing guy. And he talked to him once, and he put something up there, and I commented back on it, and he was, because he's a kind of a self-made, doing very well young guy, and he's out there selling stuff all the time, and he's an entrepreneur, and he was like, I think real masculinity is about being, you're not beholden to someone else for your paycheck, and you're just like going out. It's like you're going out and hunting the money yourself. And I'm like, that's a convincing argument from a certain perspective, but you actually just made all firemen and police not masculine,
and soldiers,
because they all take paychecks.
Yeah,
and they're all W-2s, as they like to say, and so. That I don't accept that argument as valid.
Yeah.
I mean, oh no, because you go out and sell things a lot, you're more masculine than the guy who pulls babies out of burning buildings. No. You don't get that. That's not. We're not going to take that.
Carries a gun and 200-pound backpacks for his, work for a living.
And so you have to that mentality is good, and it's good for a certain kind of guy, but it's not all of masculinity, and it doesn't encompass all of that. And to his credit, the guy I said that to was like, he was like, and he took it. Yeah. He took it out. So I was like, I was like, good. I'm glad you saw that was not the way.
Yeah, and it's tricky because there's I feel like we all have to be, certain people in particular, very careful when they think they're helping other people, because there's a certain kind of speech, not the St. Crispin's Day speech, but the Glengarry Ross speech, the coffees for closers. You think that's completely sociopathic lecture, and it has, I think, correctly been pointed out that speech can have a very positive gilding effect on guys, but it's very easy for guys to say, look, this kind of thing can have a positive effect, so therefore I'm justified in behaving like a sociopath and outright lying or speaking half-truths or playing fast and loose with what I think conceptually in order to make a buck, but I'm telling myself I'm helping people and might incidentally be helping people, so therefore it's okay. And I think that's a very dark
helping people
path.
is not the reason.
Yeah, it's the ex post facto justification.
Yeah. It's the helping people is not the reason. I'm helping people, therefore it's okay. And to be fair, I mean, I don't know that I ever necessarily started what I'm doing because I wanted to help people. I don't think I thought about that initially. I think I had an idea, and it was an idea I cared about. I don't think helping people individually actually crossed my mind. But it has been a cool side effect. It's been a positive side effect, and it became part of what I do, but I don't think it was part of my initial thing. But if your initial thing is I want money and things, and then you're like, and I'm helping people also get money and things. That's, I guess. I mean, you're providing a service, and that is, I mean, for the guys who are really into the guys who sell marketing programs and how to get rich quick. And Tim Ferriss is like the beginning of that. The get off the time clock, get off whatever. Yeah. And the guys who are selling that, I mean, they are selling a service that is helping some people. And if you're providing a service that is what you're selling, maybe you're not this great humanitarian, but you're at least providing what you're selling. And that's honest enough work.
But to sort of close the work conversation a little bit, I think if the red pill and the manosphere and all of that was a break from blank slateism and a return to sort of timeless principles, to the sort of gods of the copybook headings of some sort, a day's wages for a day's work is sort of a timeless principle. And it is worth pointing out that both that not only has Andrew Tate faced serious legal repercussions, or which are really cultural discussion, cultural consequences disguised as legal consequences, but that notwithstanding, and he said in an interview recently, was there anyone he envied? And at first he said no, and then he paused and he said, maybe I've told this before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. It was like, I do envy the guy who doesn't actually want these things. A lot of people will say that they don't, but they really do. But I envy the genuine Diogenes character who doesn't want these things. And Tim Ferriss, conversely, the other Matrix escapee, has been suffering from and talked about this in the open quite a bit. So I'm not like, outing someone or anything, but depression and suicidal ideation as well. Mike Rowe, the advocate of dirty jobs and normal jobs and the 9-to-5 grind and the Matrix that everyone's trying to escape, seems to be the most psychologically well-adjusted and
he's not a W-2, bud.
Well,
he promotes W-2s, but he's not a W-2.
Doesn't he work for some network? Didn't he work in maybe?
That's contracts and agents, man. That's like he probably works 3 days a month.
But I mean, what he's talking about is meeting people who are well adjusted. Like in his TED talk, he mentioned, he's like, the guys who pick up roadkill are whistling while they work. These farmhands that like the punchline of his whole talk was working with a utility wastewater manager guy, and they were down in some sewer pipe up to their nipples in gray water, and it was hot and it stunk. And he said he asked the guy, like, how on earth did you get into this line of work? And supposedly this guy was previously a psychiatrist, and he was waiting 15 years, my guess, to tell this joke because Micro asked him, why on earth did you quit psychiatry to do this? And the guy says, without waiting a second, says, I was tired of dealing with other people's shit. And it was just such a perfect line. But it's like that literally this mundane menial work might actually be more satisfying in a grander, like Gilgamesh kind of sense than this pursuit after this unreachable, tantalizing, impossible thing, whether that's immortality or Andrew Tate fame or whatever else. Truly escaping from work like Tim Ferriss. There's something ungraspable in these ideals. I think I don't know. Maybe it would probably take a little bit more thought and explication to really
different guys sometimes. But I mean, I understand that. I mean, obviously, I worked for 20 years doing odd jobs, and my greatest fear is ever having to do it again. But also, I sometimes miss it. So I get it. The simplest
I'm not going to say it doesn't suck sometimes.
It totally sucks. I don't like working for anybody else. Whenever I think about, maybe I should get a job just to like reconnect with the people. I think that then I remember I'd have to ask off for vacation, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, like be able to, I get at 5:30. I have to go and load a truck. And like I have like this stuff. I have to make all these stops by this time and do this and that and the other thing. And I'm like on a fucking mission that I like have things to do. And it's like it's like I have a sense of purpose, even though it's just like getting whatever expensive pasta sauce to somebody. But like or whatever it is that I did.
Yeah.
But it was something I had to do, and I took it seriously. And
right.
But what do we got?
We've been going for almost 2 hours now. Wow.
I know. We got to wrap up soon. But nothing wrong with being W-2. I've built companies. I've done the grind. I've done my time. Too much paperwork and entrepreneurship. Too much salesmanship. Don't mind not having the responsibility. Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, like I said, sometimes I'd like to be acquired. I'd like Jack Donovan Industries to be like acquired and have someone tell me what to do, so I don't have to think of all this stuff.
I wasn't trying to bash on the like entrepreneurship, because
I know.
Being a W-2 requires some entrepreneurs to set that up. I'm very grateful for my boss who built my company, even though
I know.
I've been working
It's just not. It's not the thing. It's just that it's not the solution for everybody.
Yeah,
and it's not the thing. It's not a defining thing of masculinity.
To be exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And that's the end of it. And we do a terrible job, apparently, of staying on topic and creating and talking.
The manosphere.
I was trying to talk about trying to talk about spicy stuff about the manosphere without naming too many names, because I know all the names and I know all the spicy stuff. But I hate that. I hate that, and that's what drives traffic. But I want to do it. But at the same time, like I feel like there was a lot of spicy stuff to say, but we are philosophers by nature, and we can't help but not. Yeah. We're like, oh, these boring things. Let's talk about ideas.
There's something self-defensive, I think, about keeping philosophy boring. It's like
should that be your T-shirt? Keeping philosophy boring.
Yeah, you don't want to bring too many people in, or you'll start having like Ryan Holidays all over the place. You want to keep
we don't want that.
You want to keep it like technically an impediment to too many people joining. We need more barriers to entry for this thing.
Philosophy boring. I should sign on that way next show. PH2T3R, Journal of Solar Culture. We are keeping philosophy boring.
Yeah. I mean, if philosophy gets too popular, if the Ryan Holidays are successful and make it about just amalgamating a bunch of quotes from old dead people, then like you'll have to break out a new thing, like make phenomenology separate from this other thing. We can get elitist in other ways.
Yeah. But anyway, guys, thank you for listening to our talk about the manosphere. And we have more comments than we've had in the past year. I kind of thought we get a lot of guys tuned in for this one. It's been great. Thank you for listening along. I had two questions that weren't really off topic. Let me just hit that real quick, just because thank you for watching and giving a comment. I skipped it, but I'm reading an interesting book by Stanton Marion on the concept of the black sun. What is your take on it in relationship to solar idealism? That's easy. It's Satanism. Why would you have a black sun? What's a black sun? It's a black hole. Is the polar opposite of everything we're talking about. They talk about it in relation to alchemy and all kinds of stuff, but it's really just Satanism. Because why would you have a black sun? It's like based on that thing that's on the floor of.
Did it exist before the 1920s?
No, I mean, no. It's like taking it's a Schwarzsonne, which is this symbol that is basically it was a regular sun. It was a bronze sun. It's just rusty, but they made it a black sun on the floor of Wewelsburg from the SS, and it take on this magical thing because of that. I know because I've been there, and so I got my credit. I've been there, but it's a black sun. Why would you have a black sun when you have the sun that's full of light? And you can get into all these weird things about it. They're esoteric, but at the end of the day, it's just Satanism. It's like, like why would you? You're turning it something inside out, and that is haram. And I am the solar pope, and I've said that it is haram. It is haram. The black sun is haram in solar idealism. There you go.
Why pursue haram when there are so many good halal things to enjoy?
Why? Yes, right. There are so many halal solar symbols. Why take the haram one? Anyway, thanks, guys. Thank you for jumping in. And Vince from Masculine Geek. That is one of the funnest shows I've ever been on. I like that show. They can have me back on anytime. But anyway, all right, guys, I'm going to sign off now before we get over. Now we're over 2 hours. Thanks, Chris Robertson, for being like and subscribe. He was going to say it for me, but I'm going to jump in and say it so we can close up quicker. But see you guys later, and stay solar.
Stay solar.
Pater is the cultural arm of the Order of Fire. For more, visit PH2T3R.com.